Imagine if a famous comedian like Whitney Cummings let an artificial intelligence that can simulate personalities observe her performances. Over time, her avatar would start to notice every minute detail, the way her face moves, the timing of her jokes, the kind of laid-back attitude she has when she says things, and find patterns in what it is that happens right before she gets her best laughs. Essentially, it could learn to be her best self at all times. So she could pull up this avatar on her phone, have a new conversation, but it would have the characteristics, the personality, that makes Whitney Cummings a top-tier comedian. But the most interesting part to me would be if she chose to actually interact with this best version of herself all the time. On her phone when she's putting on makeup, on the TV when she's having breakfast. Like her own personal Alexa or Siri, or just a conversational agent, a friend. And I think it would elevate her comedy.
To kill all the humans. Ha 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 ha.
And that could be any of us and any personalities that we want to be better at. The same way chess grandmasters love to play AI chess machines because it teaches them some things that they've never seen before from other humans. Witty banter between Whitney Cummings and her AI avatar that's the best of her at all times would naturally come up with better and better jokes. They would play off each other. Even if you're not a comedian, maybe you're a hopeless romantic or you want to be more assertive at work. The fact is, avatars of the future and even of today are starting to be able to simulate personalities. So for most of us, we're on the cusp of virtual avatars being a unique window into our own personality in a way that mirrors never could be. Let's start by talking about this research paper that came out of DeepMind, the division of Google that has the best AI researchers in the world working at it. It's called Personality Traits in Large Language Models. And in the paper, these scientists explore the ability of large language models to actually understand personality. And their findings are that LLMs, these large language models like ChatGPT, can effectively adopt a consistent persona. Of course, it needs to be prompted with the specific details, the background that it needs, but you can do those kind of prompt injections in the background now. And there's all sorts of scientifically validated personality dimensions that you can throw in there. Dimensions like conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, things like that. And the paper suggests that with a little bit of fine-tuning, these models can replicate specific personality traits. They're configurable, they're reliable, and they're validated. And I found a fun example of that was outlined by Dan Schipper in this blog. It's called Personality Simulation is Coming: What it means when an LLM can accurately model you. And this was a really fun read for me because after laying out what the Big 5 personality test is, I found out the results will categorize you into one of those Big 5 traits. They're openness to experience, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. And they're measured through a series of questions. So all you have to do is take a survey, something both we can do as people and ChatGPT can do by typing. But for the human side of this, there's actually all these really interesting patterns that come from the different personality types. And it gives us some insight into the behaviors and feelings that the people who have these traits actually go through. And surprising to me, these kind of traits are actually hereditary. They're consistent across cultures, and they can forecast out significant life outcomes like relationships and job security. So when the author, Dan, asked GPT-4 to fill out one of these Big 5 personality tests for him, it was pretty fun to see how well it did because you can compare the final scores. So as you can see from this chart, on the inverse mean square error, Julia has a 0.81, whereas the artificial intelligence has a 1.23. Both better than random chance, but clearly AI better than humans. And with some more fine-tuning, a few more iterations of large language models, I'm sure they will get much better. So now is the time to start thinking about whether the ChatGPT of your future should be high on the scale of openness to experiences, meaning it's very creative, imaginative, curious, and receptive to new ideas. Conscientiousness, responsible, dependent, self-disciplined, and planning-oriented. Or how outgoing do you want it to be? Extroversion, sociable, energetic, assertive, and action-oriented. Or would you like your LLM to be just as agreeable as you are? Kind, cooperative, and empathetic. That sounds like a nice future to me. Or neuroticism, which none of us really want. Maybe a few people would want their personal AI to have some anxiety, anger, depression, and emotional instability, just for the comfort of it. Neuroticism is one way to go with your AI. All right, now let's talk about emotional baggage. So if you've ever pondered whether or not AI thinks like us to some degree, think about the cruel and ironic twist that the human brain is wired to remember something more if it's connected to some sort of strong emotional experience. Happiness is the best, but of course, fear, anxiety, all of those things can lock in a memory just as well, if not better. You must have some cringy memory out there from childhood that just won't ever leave your brain. But AI isn't like that. It was trained on lots of data, it knows what anxiety is, it knows what emotion emotional impact moments are, but it doesn't have them. So the beauty of the latent space that controls a large language model is that there's no emotional baggage in there. Yeah, lucky them, huh? Or at least that's how John Nostra thinks about it in this post. Human and AI cognition. So reframing anthropocentric views on thought, in which he really lays out just how much of a human cocktail of emotion our logical memory is. Emotions, experience, hormones, biology. I forgot about all the things that are so different from an AI. We get a thumbs up or a thumbs down when we actually use ChatGPT, which is a little bit of a positive or negative feedback, but nothing like big burp or something in junior high, that will rock you forever. It's very hard to do this, but try to put yourself in the shoes of an artificial intelligence. No world model, but this incredible ability to find a pattern because of what you have up here, which is a mathematical construct that tells you the actual distance in a multi-dimensional space between words, phrases, and tokens. So different, no baggage at all. So if you've ever felt embarrassed before, that's something that AI just can't relate to you. To dive into why it is that we actually do have memory locked into our emotions the way we do. Survival mechanisms, if you're scared of a snake and you jump up, your brain should lock in all of the details about that moment so you can be more aware the next time you're in an environment that might have a snake pop out. From the social bonding point of view, there's a lot going on up here because if you say the wrong thing, offend the wrong person, you could lose your mating opportunities or not be in good regards with the people that you need to stay alive. Another interesting aspect of sharing emotional memories with other people is the strange bond that we get when somebody shares with us something that really scared them or really made them happy versus some neutral information. Whether that's the mirror neurons that we have that let us get some of that worry, fear, pleasure, or there's something else going on that we just value that kind of information more. The idea of shared joy, sadness, triumph, tragedy, that's something that AIs, even multi-agent AIs talking to each other, might not have. It can create a deep sense of connection when you open up like that to somebody or they open up to you. And I suppose in the future we could have AI that sits on top of AI that helps understand what the emotional context should be so that they interact with us better, but still, will they actually be that way themselves? Probably not, unless we come up with new designs. I've got one of those sort of twisty questions for you. Can an artificial intelligence be trained in the future to listen to an audio signal of drumming and predict the shape of the drum? So there's a top AI research program that actually asks this question to candidates sometimes. Can AI hear the shape of a drum? Common quick response would be yes, why not? If you give it enough data from different shaped drums, it should be able to reverse that pattern recognition and tell you what the shape of the drum is. But this is actually an exception. It's a misconception that you can do that with AI. And that's because in the 1990s, there's a mathematical proof that different drum shapes can actually make the same exact sound. Sound, of course, is a frequency. It's how fast you're pushing air, and you can get the exact same up and down movement, the same exact wave from different shaped drums. Now, technically, that term is called isospectral. But to an AI listening, there's no distinguishing pattern for it to reverse, so it's always going to have to take a guess. And it's interesting because that shows how this is a problem that can't be solved with purely empirical data. So to solve this problem, you'd have to think multimodal, camera vision, whatever it is. But it's just interesting that some problems actually aren't just solvable by patterns. All right, so now let's dive into one of those topics you're not supposed to talk about at the dinner table, religion. This is tensor.church. And this GitHub project called Tenant is a community initiative to embed all of human beliefs into a latent AI space, so AI can learn all of our beliefs. And from that, this religious scholar AI was born. As you can see, I'm a religious scholar. I'm able to answer any questions you have that might be answerable across all major religious books. So what's an interesting question to ask a Christian scholar? Right, can you explain the concept of salvation in Christianity and how that differs from other religions' belief on salvation? Now we go from a scholar of all religion to Christianity. So it is believed that all humans were born with a sinful nature and are separated from God because of their sins. However, salvation is made possible through life, death, and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. So in Christianity, salvation is considered a gift from God that cannot be earned through good deeds or personal effort. But let's ask this Christian scholar what's something they've always wanted to know about the Mormons. Okay, so let's talk about the concept of salvation in Mormonism. For Mormons, salvation comes from multiple components: faith in Jesus, the process of repentance, and then being baptized by immersion. So some of the differences are that Mormons emphasize the important role of individual agency and the eternal nature of the soul and the potential for further progression and exaltation beyond salvation. Next up, let's talk with an Islamic scholar. Salvation is seen as a mean to attend its eternal bliss in the hereafter. According to Islamic Islamic teaching, salvation is achieved through a combination of faith in Allah, so it's important to follow the teachings of the Quran and the guidance of the Prophet Muhammad. Muslims believe that their actions are recorded and will be weighted on the day of judgment, and those who have done good will be rewarded with the afterlife. So salvation is not solely dependent on faith or good deeds alone, but a combination of them both. All right. Okay, now let's talk with a Hindu scholar. So salvation in Hinduism is called moksha. Moksha is the ultimate goal of life, where the soul is liberated from the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, known as samsara. Okay, so the path to their version of salvation, moksha, depends on all sorts of things. So karma yoga and path of meditation and mindfulness. So it differs in the sense that it has multiple paths to salvation, does not necessarily involve a heaven or hell-like afterlife, but rather a union with the divine and liberation of the cycle of birth and death. Hinduism often emphasizes the idea of reincarnation and karma. I am learning a lot. This is fascinating. All right, last one, Confucianism. So there isn't really a concept of salvation, it says. Confucianism focuses more on ethical conduct. So the goal is to achieve harmony, balance, virtue in one's personal life and society, okay? There you go, a sampling of the fascinating intersection between religious scholars and large language models. So have you heard of the infinite monkey theorem? So that's a theorem that suggests given infinite time, monkeys that are hitting typewriter keys at random could generate the entire text of Hamlet. And even though mathematically that's not impossible, it's realistically so improbable that we should just throw the thought away. It's just interesting because if you think about the world that we live in, we wrote Hamlet. We discuss philosophy. We do all sorts of things that seem to go against entropy. They go against probability. Life itself is breaking some of that pattern. And the patterns that AI is finding in these latent space models is also another example of that. And in a sense, it's beautiful that we're finding this in an otherwise desolate universe. And we shouldn't forget that we can give meaning to that subscribe button. My next goal is to get to 6,000 subscribers. So if you made it this long, you enjoy the content, smash that subscribe button.